Welcome, and thank you for joining Speak Up for Safer Care. Speak Up for Safer Care is a product of SaferCare Texas, the patient safety division at the University of North Texas Health Science Center in Fort Worth, Texas, where it is our mission to challenge traditional thinking to eliminate preventable harm. Speak Up for Safer Care illuminates gaps in care, process, or design that lead to preventable harm in all healthcare settings. I'm your host, John Sims, Director of SaferCare Texas, and joining me is our co-host, Leanne Cunningham, Strategic Operations Assistant Director.
Good afternoon, John.
All right. And our guest today is Karen Kendrick, and this is episode 11, What is a Patient Safety Organization? Karen holds a master's degree in nursing leadership and administration. She held director positions over medical surgical units, nursing communications, and home health. And she then focused her leadership on clinical improvement and quality performance improvement. Currently, she serves as Vice President of Clinical Initiatives and Quality for the Texas Hospital Association and leads the Texas Hospital Association Patient Safety Organization. Karen, did I miss anything about your impressive background?
No, you covered that very well. I do have 4 grandchildren. You left that out, but okay. Other than that, you got it.
I've got you beat, Karen. I have 6.
So let's jump in here. Explain how patient safety has evolved over the last couple of decades. Have outcomes improved, and if so, what areas?
Well, that's a big question. But a pivotal moment for patient safety in healthcare was in 2019. And that is when the Institute of Medicine released their report, To Err is Human. And this served as a humbling call to action for healthcare, as well as for the government agencies that oversee healthcare. And it launched many activities. It launched numerous quality and safety initiatives and programs. It spurred healthcare organizations and leaders to look to industry for solutions and for ideas, looking at other high-risk industries such as aviation and nuclear energy. It certainly increased transparency because it was all out there. And so we, as an industry, were able to step up and address the issues. Some of the things that have improved as a result of that wake-up call is that we have recognized as an industry that zero harm must be the goal. Regardless of what type of harm we're talking about, our goal should always be zero. And with that in mind, it spurs us to continuously look at our processes to see how we can improve. Another important change is that it expanded our definition of the care team, because no longer is it the physician, the captain of the ship, and the nurse running behind with carrying a notepad. It is everyone is involved in patient care, and everyone is involved in patient safety, including the patient, the family, the housekeeper. Everyone has a role to play. And it also caused us to re-envision how we define harm, how we define our efforts to cast blame and look for solutions, and instead look at how are our processes designed to either allow a harm event to occur or make it easier for it to happen, or how can we design those systems and processes to make it less likely for any harm event to occur. And so there's been a lot done. It's difficult to measure harm that did not happen. To measure something that doesn't happen is a difficult data point. However, we do know that from a report that was released in 2018, that between 2014 and 2017, that 3-year period, hospital-acquired conditions decreased by 13% overall. And if you think 13% isn't a very high number, that would equate to, given the harm events where we made improvements, to 20,700 lives saved and a healthcare dollar savings of $7.7 billion of healthcare dollars saved. And so it doesn't take a big percentage point to make a big difference in an industry like healthcare.
Sure. Wow. That's impressive.
So, what are some patient safety opportunities, Karen?
Oh my! Well, I mentioned how everyone has a role in healthcare, and I think one of the big areas for patient safety going forward is going to be expanding our relationships with patients and families and engaging them in not only in the care episode that is happening, but in our ongoing quality improvement and patient safety work. To make sure that they're at the table as we work through addressing either a harm event that happened and coming up with preventative solutions to mitigate going forward, or designing new processes and ensuring that we have considered any potential harm events that could happen. Another thing is to make sure that we are incorporating an equity lens when we're looking at healthcare safety and quality. That we're considering the impact of healthcare equity or inequities and what that's having on our patients. We also have a lot of opportunities to look further upstream. Long before an event happens, an unintended event happens, there are multiple opportunities perhaps to have prevented that further upstream. And so I think we're getting much, much better at looking at our data and going back to see how far back we could put processes in place to ensure that those types of events don't happen. And something that I know that our colleagues in academia are working hard on, and we are very pleased with, is to continue to expand the curriculum for our healthcare providers to include skill sets related to quality improvement and patient safety, to ensure that when they come out, they recognize that that's part of their role and they have the skills to do that and to be part of that team. I think that is critically important to do that.
Well, I am not a healthcare professional. I really respect your response due to inclusion of family. So in layman's terms, if you would, please discuss the implications of the Patient Safety and Quality Improvement Act of 2005.
Certainly. This was a very important act, and what it did is it established a voluntary, federally protected reporting system that would enhance the data available to assess and resolve patient safety and healthcare quality issues. In other words, it created a shared learning environment for the healthcare community to look at patient safety data openly and honestly amongst ourselves and share what we are learning, so that the situation maybe that contributed to an event at hospital A can be shared with hospital B, and they're able to put things in place so they don't experience an event like that. And so it is a very proactive program to promote patient safety.
And you're alluding to my next question, and that is, the subject of this episode. What, again, in layman's terms, is a patient safety organization?
Well, patient safety organizations, or PSOs, as we call them, were established by the Patient Safety Act, and they're the mechanism by which this enhanced data and shared learning among healthcare organizations can occur. And so there are 94 listed PSOs across the country. They are administered by the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, another healthcare acronym, AHRQ. And the purpose of a PSO, when healthcare organizations or providers join a PSO, it is for within that PSO to transparently share their patient safety information, warts and all, and then share the learning amongst themselves. so that we can continuously improve the quality of care. So the core purpose of a PSO is to serve as that external expert to their members. We collect and evaluate the patient safety information. We promote shared learning and disseminate information, provide training and consultation on all areas of patient safety for our members. So it's a very valuable organization for healthcare organizations to be a part of.
Certainly. And SaferCare Texas is currently working on, and we will likely be listed as a medical office patient safety organization this fiscal year. So we're very excited about that. Karen, the way that I think about this is anything that's in litigation, an attorney is going to tell you, keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything. It'll be used against you. And when we look at patient safety events and everybody has to keep their mouth shut, we don't have the opportunity to learn and amend a process or a system that led to that event so that future harm can be prevented. And so that is so important. And I'm so thankful for the act in 2005 and for patient safety organizations. There needs to be more. The next thing I want to talk a little bit about nuclear power and the airline industry. But before I do, I recently watched this Netflix documentary called The Downfall. Have you seen that?
I've not.
For people that are very involved in patient safety, I highly recommend it. It's about Boeing, the 737 MAX, and in 2018 and 2019, within 5 months of each other, they had 2 new planes that crashed and everybody on board perished. And just the patient safety and the blame game is mentioned in there. So it's about an hour and a half, but it's a great documentary. Got me all excited, and my wife was watching it with me, and she didn't know why I was excited. She didn't understand all the terms, But why do you think that healthcare has been unable to appreciate some of the safety outcomes of nuclear power or the airline industry?
Well, I think the nature of healthcare, we think of ourselves as so different from any other industry. And when you are a member of the crew of an airliner, and you have the pilot and the co-pilot and the navigator, they are interacting with a very large machine, with an airplane. Same with nuclear power. The nuclear engineer and that team, they're working with a large power generator, a machine. In healthcare, we're working with people, and people are not as predictable as machinery, and every individual is different. And while you can design 100 widgets and each widget looks alike, there's no 2 people that are alike. And so that's one of the challenges with healthcare, is that we are dealing with people. And not only are we all different, but we also have emotions. We also have previous experiences we bring to the table. And it makes healthcare extremely challenging. That said, healthcare has learned a tremendous amount from the airline industry, from nuclear power, and from the military. We've learned a tremendous amount from the military as well, and primarily about team dynamics and how that plays a role in safety. And when an airliner is experiencing a problem and the navigator is trying to speak up and say something, the pilot has to listen.
Mm-hmm.
That has to happen in healthcare too. And so one of the key things that I have seen over the years that I've been in healthcare has been an increased focus on that culture of safety that promotes an environment in which anybody not only can, but is expected to speak up if they think that there might be any potential for a safety concern. That includes the patient, the family, the housekeeper, the lab tech. Doesn't matter who it is. can stop the line and say, I have a safety concern. And that concern needs to be addressed before we can move on. And I think that that's one of the primary things we took away from those other industries, because the whole idea is to prevent an event from happening, to not have a safety event. But then at the other end, what we've learned from these other industries is that, okay, if an event does happen, what do we do? And when you think about when there is an airplane crash and how they recreate, basically, they recreate that plane, they recreate the conditions, they investigate, they go all the way back to the beginning and work through to see what happened. And they keep digging until they find out what was the root cause for that airplane to go down. They don't just chalk it up to pilot error and stop there. They keep looking. And that's what healthcare has had to do too. We've had to, when we do our root cause analyses on events, is to continue to ask why. Why did that happen? Why didn't they know how to operate that piece of equipment? Why didn't that plug fit into that wall socket? Why, whatever it may be, until we get down to the very root cause, then we're able to put into place solutions which are more than just saying, John, you messed up. Read this material, take this test, and don't do that again.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, we want to redesign that piece of equipment or that plug in the wall or whatever and put into place structural designs so that you can't make that mistake again. It's physically impossible to make that mistake again. And those are some things we've learned from industry.
We make it hard to do the wrong thing.
Exactly. We're all human, and humans make mistakes. And if we're only relying on human memory and skills and emotional stability, we're setting ourselves up. So to design processes and equipment and environments of care where doing the right thing is easy and making a mistake is hard. For instance, I remember years ago, there was a time when you had two plugins on the wall. One was for oxygen. One is for medical gas. Those are two very different things.
Mm-hmm.
However, there was a time when those plugins were identical. And you could plug in the oxygen into the medical gas plug and vice versa. And there was a serious event and when the wrong gas was administered to a patient. Well, rather than just take someone and fire them or, for, being so foolish as to plug in the wrong plug, let's make sure those plugs are never the same so that it's impossible to plug it into the wrong port. Those are the kinds of solutions we need to get to.
I couldn't agree more. And with the gas prices as high as they are right now, I'm thinking about gas. And so you can't put diesel gas into your non-diesel operated car because it won't fit, right?
Yeah.
Because the consequences will be great. I hear you talking about, we're caring for people, and we have people that are caring for people who, as in our first episode, Jessica termed human frailty.
Yeah.
When people show up to work, we don't know what their environment was. Did they have a wreck? Did they have a fight? Where are they at? Are they on top of their game? And the other thing that I think about, Karen, is psychological safety. So you mentioned stopping the line. Well, in a fast-paced environment like healthcare, things are moving really quick. We got to move these patients over here because we're expecting 25 more in the next 10 minutes. I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean. If somebody stops the line, do they have the safety culture that would support them in that? And I think that's an opportunity, at least from my experience, that I think we should work towards.
Oh, absolutely. And there are organizations who have done tremendous work in this area. to ensure that psychological safety for staff to speak up, to report problems. One of the challenges has been when an event happens, you find out that there were numerous near misses or times when a similar event almost happened over the previous months or even years, that had we known, we could have fixed that process before an actual event reached a patient. And so that psychological safety and that willingness and ability and freedom to speak up is critically important so that we can provide that safe environment. And having a policy in place, such as a stop the line policy, which is very clear, very succinct, and allows something for an employee to stand on and saying, I have the right to speak up, but also I have a responsibility to speak up. If I knew that was a problem and I didn't speak up, that may be an issue. So it has to cut both ways. The other piece of that psychological safety is that we need to have each other's back, and we need to know when someone perhaps needs to step away. I think back over the last 2 years and our healthcare providers and how overwhelmed the healthcare systems have been with the pandemic and short staffing and more patients than was ever anticipated to be in any one area. And the challenges were tremendous. But there were times when people were working way too many hours, way too many days in a row, with far too much stress. And so knowing when to step up and say, John, why don't you go take a break and let me cover for you for a few minutes?
Sure.
I think you need a breather. Or you feeling free to ask for that. I think that that's also critically important part of patient safety.
Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more.
I like that. Being able to say it's okay to step away and knowing it's okay to ask to step away.
Mm-hmm.
That's vital in psychological safety for sure. I do have a question. I am not a healthcare professional. For the sake of transparency, I will throw that out there, but I have stepped into the role of a caregiver. So, what role, Karen, do you think that caregivers play in patient safety?
Oh, critical role. Very valuable role. Very often patients, family members, or loved ones, they know that patient better than anyone. And they may notice a change or something of concern before the clinician notices it. And so having that person there, that was one of the challenges during the pandemic. We weren't allowing anybody in the room with the patient. And so, and patients sometimes either they aren't able to speak up or they're afraid to speak up. And having a family member or a loved one at the bedside who knows that individual and cares about that individual, speaking up on their behalf is very important. Also, just to be part of the care team, to help the patient ask questions, voice concerns, to ensure that they and the patient hear what's being told to them and understand the plan of care, to contribute to the plan of care. It is a team effort to take care of patients. I love the idea of having a designated care partner. And that's someone
wonderful.
that's something that, I've seen done before in other hospitals where I've worked, is patients would state who that person is. Sometimes it's a spouse, sometimes it's a neighbor. It could be anyone that they trust who can be there with them. And the care team responds by scheduling patient teaching during a time when that care partner can be there, planning discharge planning and instructions when that care partner can be there, so that you have that extra set of ears and eyes to ensure that all of the instructions are understood and everything's clear. Because when you don't feel well, when you're afraid, when you're worried, about the kids at home, who's feeding the dog, or how much is this going to cost. It's very hard to take in the information that sometimes doctors and nurses and other members of the team are throwing at you. And having that designated care partner is so important to the quality of care that you receive.
Teamwork makes the dream work, that's for sure. So I'm going to ask you my final question. It's a biggie. What inspired you to pursue nursing, and what inspired you to carry that nursing pursuit into patient safety?
Well, I think like a lot of people, I got into nursing because I had a family member who had an encounter with the healthcare system. A family member who suffered a severe heart attack when they were in their mid 40s. And so we had lots of encounters with the healthcare system, and I always loved the sciences, and I saw the interaction with nursing and the impact that they can have with patients and families, and it intrigued me. So I got into nursing that way. But then I wasn't in nursing very long before I made my first medication error. I gave a patient the wrong medication. Didn't mean to. Horrified me. Fortunately, it didn't harm the patient, but I'll never forget that moment when I realized my error. And then as I got into roles of management, and I was managing nursing units and working with members of the care team, and particularly new nurses, and watching them as they struggle to keep all the balls in the air that they were juggling, and realize that, we really can do better. We can really make processes better and the environment better for the care of our patients. And I just really had a passion. I didn't want to see people beat themselves up for an error that they made because our processes weren't good. And I didn't want to see patients harmed. And so I gradually started gravitating towards the quality and patient safety side of the work. And one of the things I have found so gratifying about it is the ability to make a difference on a larger scale. Rather than one-to-one with patients, to make a difference in a way that impacts patients and the healthcare team on a much larger scale. And so I found that work very gratifying.
Well, thank you, Karen, for sharing that knowledge and expertise with us today. And thank you to all of our podcast listeners. Speak Up for SaferCare Texas is a product of SaferCare Texas, the patient safety division at the Health Science Center in Fort Worth, Texas. We'd like to thank our technical producer, Rob Upchurch, for being with us today and handling our podcast. We're calling you to action. Speak up for safer care. Suppose you are a healthcare worker, a counselor, subject matter expert, former patient, or caregiver, and you have a patient safety story. SaferCare Texas invites you to be our next guest. Please contact us through our website, SaferCareTexas.org. Also, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at SaferCare Texas. We'll talk again next Wednesday, and thanks again for listening. And as always, we encourage you to advocate and speak up for safer care.